Well, this is Ed Stetzer Live, and of course this and every Saturday at this time, or really any time if you're listening via podcast, we come to you live with some really helpful, hopeful conversations, and I think that today is going to be one of those conversations. And of course, I'm Ed Stetzer. I'm the Dean of the Talbot School of Theology, but I'm glad today to be with you and host you each and every week at this time. Remember, you can subscribe to this as a podcast at any point by going to edstetzerlive.com. All the links to today's program are all easiest to find at edstetzerlive.com. Now, I should say, we're actually pre-recording this program, and so we're not able to take your calls, but that gives us more time with the guest, and so it's going to be a great conversation. Well, John, one of the privileges I had was to hire you. It's kind of a strange thing to hire someone and to interview them, and the reason I hired you, we were at the Wheaton College Billy Graham Center, Wheaton College Graduate School, is I really I wanted to get a voice from the future. And I think Australia, in many ways, as a secular context, is, of course, more secular, down that road of secularism. And so you don't like the word apologist, so I'm going to ask you to explain why. But you, as a representative of public Christianity in Australia, so now you've lived in the U.S. for 3+ years. What's the distinctions and differences between the two? I mean, there's a lot. Tell us.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
You're right that Australia is maybe 15 years ahead of America on secularization. It's maybe 30 years behind on everything else, but on secularization, we're a little ahead. And yet the trajectory is almost identical. So I have this thing in class where I put up the graph of the decline in America for the last 20 years, and it's pretty much the same decline as 20 years ago in Australia, which doesn't really mean that's how America's going to go. And
because America's been a bit of an outlier on religiosity, for sure. Catching up, though.
Look, there's a little bit of talk about a revival and all that sort of thing.
We'll talk about that too.
And of course, the Lord doesn't operate on sociological models, right? So things could get really bad, and then all of a sudden, boom, the Lord adds to their number daily. So with all those caveats, I do think America is going the way of Australia. But what's probably going to happen, and I also see this in Australia, is you've got sort of two gears at the same time. You've got increasing irreligion, and I don't think that's going to stop. It's not like any talk of revival means that irreligion calms down. No, I think it probably gets angrier. At the same time as you have sort of an enduring or even a reviving interest in the Christian faith. And it's working out how those two things work together that I think is the fun of what I call public Christianity. And I see that in America. Obviously, the number of genuine Bible-believing Christians in America is so large. That means something. That means there is a massive base. Whereas in Australia, we might only have 10, 15% of the population sort of actively Christian in a biblical way. It might be double that in America. Even if you were to remove all of the in-name only Christians, you've surely got 20%, maybe 30%, who are Bible-believing Christians. And what that means is you have enormous resources. I mean, the Christian universities, the seminaries that are remaining and thriving. I think that's a base that so long as American Bible-believing Christians can work out what does it mean to be in more contested times without being a bully, I have great hope. I am enthusiastic about the future of Christianity in America, but only on that caveat.
With what does it be to be faithful as a Christian in contested times without being a bully? So those are the two things.
Where you know that all you've got in the end is persuasion. And we could add, prayer, service and suffering. But it seems to me, if the American church can rely on persuasion more than cultural heritage, laws, celebrity, but just rely on the power of persuasion, I'm excited and I want to be part of it. I want to jump into that contest and help other evangelicals jump into the contest with prayer, persuasion, service, and suffering.
Prayer, persuasion, service, and suffering.
Yeah.
And you talk about this, again, we're going to talk a little bit about your book, Bullies and Saints, an honest look at good and the evil of Christian history. We're actually having this conversation at Oxford University. We're at Wycliffe Hall. You and I teach together. I host this annual, I guess it's an ISW, In-Service Week, but it's basically the Church of England requires an evangelism class or training for all the ordinands, but we bring over Talbot students. You come over and you do some lecture. The Anglican ordinands, independent students are there. The UK is, I guess, statistically sort of between the US and Australia. Is a good way to articulate it?
It is.
You mentioned the idea of revival. You know, they've actually talking about here a report last year that they released about a quiet revival. And significant increases as a percentage. You know, it's going from 4 to 6% is a significant increase in the UK context. Would you use the term, for what you've seen in America, would you use the term revival to describe the current moment?
I wouldn't.
Okay. I should disclose, neither do I.
Either in Britain or in the US.
I appreciate the fact they put the word quiet ahead of it.
Yeah.
But statistically, what I say to many Americans
I mean,
is,
a quiet avalanche.
What does that mean?
A quiet tsunami.
What I say is,
does it work?
If you're asking if there's a revival, there's not yet a revival. You would know.
There are hints of renewed interest in Christian faith.
And that, I think, is an important distinction. Unpack that for us, because I agree with you.
I think it's partly a result of bottoming out. So the decline has been dramatic. They're down to about 46% in the last census of Brits who say they're Christian in any way.
Right.
Whereas in America it's nearly 70%. In Australia it's 44%. So once you get down to those numbers, you're sort of bottoming out. Of those who just used Christian as a name.
Sure. That I'm not Jewish, I'm not atheist, I'm a Christian.
And there used to be a little bit of credibility in that, in business, in politics, to say you're Christian. Well, I think that's bottomed out. And what that means statistically is that when it really has bottomed out, you are going to see a bump. Because once nominal Christianity has sort of disappeared, all you've got is the growing Christianity. And so you're going to see these little pockets of, next year, there are more people going to church than there were last year. So you're going to need little bits and pieces of that. And I think that's great. There's also an exhaustion about secularism.
Sure.
That is more prominent here than it is in the US, because Britain is more further along in secularism. And so people are tired of the vacuous, nihilistic, lack of hope in secularism. So people scratch around and go, maybe that old thing we used to be into, maybe church does have something. And so people are, sticking their nose in church, they're downloading Bible apps, they're listening to Christian music. I think it's way too early to tell whether there's a Britain-wide return to church.
Sure.
They're just little pockets, little signals. And frankly, next year we might find those signals are gone.
Right.
Because, there was that massive Pew Research study from 2024 in the US that found that there was something like a 1.5% increase in those who say they were Christians over the previous years. And there was lots of reporting. I remember there was a New York Times article saying, are we beginning to see the return of Christianity? But you drill down into the article and the researchers said, no, basically it's the bottoming out of nominal Christianity. The growth of some brands of Christianity have just lifted the numbers ever so slightly. But the numbers are so dramatically bad amongst young Americans that really, unless something dramatic happens, the next survey they do, 5 years from now, when that cohort has moved up.
Right. We call it generational cohort replacement.
Way more irreligious.
Yeah, I mean, the trends, the bigger picture trends are not encouraging. It seems to a continued growth of secularism. There are some places, I have coming out an article, I guess it's actually going to be in early 26. My editor's column at Outreach Magazine is there a revival? And the conclusion I make is, again, if you are asking if there's a revival, there's not yet a revival, you'd know. But there are some interesting trends. Barna's a smaller, it's not a small data set, but it's a smaller data set than Pew. And we're actually seeing some movement in church attendance. We're seeing some movement in people who say they have a commitment to Christ that's important, which is a very easy question to answer yes to. But even those maybe point back to return to where it was 10 years ago. So again, it's not, unless you think there was a revival in 2015, it's not a revival. But I don't want to rain on anyone's parade. No. I want a revival. It's like we sound negative.
I long for it to be the case. In fact, it's because I long for it to be the case, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. Right. I want to know for sure that it's happening. And meanwhile, I just want to be preaching the gospel.
And that's our call. So what I don't want to do is end up with a triumphalistic, well, right now everyone's coming to church, because they're not, but it's an opportunity for us to show and share the love of Jesus. So talk to us about some of the things. You're an historian, which is a little strange, because we think of you as an apologist. You don't like the word apologist. You know, I mean, again, we have the largest apologetics program in the world at the Talbot School of Theology. So
Lord bless you and keep you.
I need you to be nice towards apologists. So let's quickly make the distinction between apologist and a public Christian that you are.
Well, apologetics has, obviously not at Talbot, but everywhere else. How about we go with that?
You're allowed to come on my program and not agree.
It has a reputation for not actually being an academic discipline. Okay. Whereas they use history to make arguments only ever in favor of Christianity. Sure. They don't actually do history. They use science only ever to make a positive case. They don't actually do the discipline of science. And so those who are in the disciplines, philosophy, science, history, look at apologetics and say it's not a discipline. It's almost the opposite of a discipline, because all it is grabbing the bits that are in our favor from all the various disciplines. And that's a real problem.
To be ready to give an answer to the question?
Yes.
That seems like something we should do.
I know, but if you're only using bits from the disciplines, the real disciplines, that are in your favor, and not listening to the bits that aren't, it's only going to take some smart doubter listening to you and going, hang on, but I've read 3 other things, and you're not telling the whole story. I mean, I often give the example of people saying there's more evidence for Jesus Christ than Julius Caesar. This has sort of broken out as a meme, as it were. And it's based on a work long ago that pointed out that there are more manuscript copies of the New Testament than there are copies of Caesar's Gallic Wars. So if you say, we've got several thousand copies of the New Testament fragments, we've got 5 copies of Gallic Wars, Jesus wins. Well, that's nuts to a historian, because Julius Caesar has coins, inscriptions, multiple people in the time speaking about Julius Caesar. I mean, frankly, there is way more evidence for Julius Caesar than Jesus Christ. I don't doubt Jesus Christ. Sure. Nor, by the way, do secular ancient historians. But to just grab a piece of historical data and then make a point about, Jesus wins, it's a problem. And my other problem with apologetics is just the word, because you can do apologetics well.
That's what I want to hear.
Of course you can.
That's what we're teaching people, but keep going.
You just have to be genuinely engaged with historical, scientific, philosophical scholarship. But there's another problem, and it's coming your way, and that is the word is almost only ever used in the secular world to mean a controversial propagandist. So I am collecting media examples of the use of the word apologetics, apologist, apologism, and the Atlantic, New York Times, the British Times, BBC. I have many examples where they use the word like this. So-and-so is a Putin apologist.
Right, sure.
So-and-so is doing apologetics for Big Pharma. I even saw a pedophilia apologetics. Now, they're not thinking of the Christian use of the word, but the word now means propaganda. And in the Oxford English Dictionary, the primary example they give of apologist is an apologist for fascism in the 1930s. Well, I'm just saying the word is a damaged word. And so what do we want to do? We want to make Christ public. That's why I use the word public Christianity. I'm not on a crusade to get everyone using that. I just don't want to use words that are triggering to the very people we're trying to reach.
So stay with us. We're going to continue our conversation in just a moment. All right, we're back. Ed Stetzer Live, and thank you for our partners and affiliates. You know, we're on over 200 outlets, terrestrial radio around the country, on Moody Radio Network partners and affiliates, and we're thankful to have this conversations like the one we're having today. Okay, to me, in some ways, it sounds like you're against bad apologetics, which I agree with. The term you have a concern about as well. Let's talk about evangelism today. That word, I mean, and by the way, that word's used by people that are evangelists for bad things as well. I mean, I think Apple actually hired one person at one point who was an evangelist for Apple. So it's used, misused. But we're actually here at Oxford, and we're teaching, you know, the Church of England requires their Anglican ordinands to do a course in evangelism. All the schools in the Church of England do. We partner together. We have Talbot students come over. You and several others come teach with the class. How do we reclaim the word evangelism if that's got a negative word as well?
Part of the difference is evangelism the word is used in the New Testament in exactly the way we're using it. The word apologetics isn't. I know we've all got 1 Peter 3:15.
Sure.
But there's no way.
Don't forget 1 Peter 3:15. We like that.
Yeah, but always be prepared to give an apologia. Right.
Okay, but I think we disagree on the apologizing, but that's okay. We disagree in class sometimes. But talk to me about evangelism.
But there's no way Peter expected an apologetics ministry.
Sure.
It's just the normal Greek term for defending something. Whereas the word evangelism and gospel occurs 130 times in the New Testament in exactly the way we still use it. That is declaring the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus for our salvation. So we are stuck with that. And in a way, I don't think it's as damaged a word.
Interesting.
Because it's so associated with the church, but for very few examples, that people, when they hear the word evangelism, they mean that thing where Christians are always trying to tell you about. Whereas apologetics now has a life of its own. The word has a life of its own only in this negative sense. So I love evangelism. I think of myself actually, primarily, theologically, as an evangelist.
Okay, so talk to us why then, I mean, I don't know. It seems to me that evangelism has maybe fallen on hard times.
Yeah.
And if you go back, you weren't in an American evangelical world, but if you go back when I was a brand new believer, they had whole schools people would go to train the Billy Graham schools for evangelism. I actually met at Wheaton and other places. And the idea was that everyone, I mean, you had things like EE, the Evangelism Explosion, and I just don't hear, there were times when evangelism conferences sort of filled up the whole place, and yet now it's sort of like people are almost embarrassed to talk about it.
Yeah.
Is that my perception, or do you see it as well? And what do we do about it?
It's definitely the case. Well, we don't abandon the word, but I do think we need to fill the word with fresh meaning and with fresh ways that don't sound propagandistic, that don't sound like we're bullies. And there have been so many evangelists that have been sort of caught out doing naughty things. That there is a little bit of that sort of shade cast over it.
I think we could reclaim the apologist meaning. But anyway, we better stop that. Let's just focus on that here as well. So
maybe.
And I think evangelists, I mean, it almost sounds like shyster to a lot of people. Like if you're on a plane and you're an evangelist, someone asks what you are, that might not be what you say. But how do we reclaim evangelism as a core value in the life of the church and the life of the Christian?
My feeling is that, first and foremost, it's a spiritual crisis. It seems to me the thing that inspires evangelistic activity and zeal is a fresh vision of Christ's majesty over all things. And although Christians tick that box, yes, I believe Jesus is Lord of heaven and earth. If it's not really seeped into your heart to the point where you might be in a lecture with your university professor and he's criticizing Christianity, if you're not sitting there going, yeah, but I know Jesus reigns. Jesus owns this room too. Not in a smug way, not in an arrogant way, but in a really confident way, almost to the point where you feel sorry for your atheist professor, lecturer. Not the insecure kind of, no, but a kind of, oh, Lord, have mercy on this person. That's someone who's deeply confident. But I don't see much of that anymore. I think a lot of Christians are beaten down by force of culture, argument, our own bad behaviour.
Sure.
So that we are shy. We know theologically that Jesus must be Lord of heaven and earth, but I don't think it's touched our hearts. And to go back to 1 Peter 3:15, what Peter does there, I think is the solution. He says, do not fear what they fear, what everyone else fears. But in your hearts, set apart Christ as Lord, always being prepared to give an answer.
So good.
So it's the connection between setting apart Christ as Lord in your heart. The degree to which we've done that is the degree to which we'll step up and give an answer. And then if you think of the Great Commission, it's exactly the same logic. In fact, I'm sure Peter got it from because he was
you
there.
Would think,
he
yes,
was there,
yes,
when Jesus said, all authority in heaven
right?
and on earth has been given to me.
Such an overlooked part of the Great Commission. Reverses that Matthew, remember when Jesus, Satan takes him up this high pinnacle, all this can be yours. At the end, he says, all this already is mine.
Yeah. Therefore, go, make disciples of all nations. Unless you're utterly in your heart convinced he is Lord of heaven and earth, the therefore there's a disconnect in that therefore. And then if you think of probably the most evangelistically oriented Old Testament passage, I think is Psalm 96.
Okay.
Declare his salvation among all the nations.
All the nations, sure.
And then the next word is because, for, ki in Hebrew, declare his salvation among all the nations, for great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. He is to be feared above all gods. All the gods of the nations are nothing, it says, but the Lord made the heavens. So everywhere I look, this is a long-winded way of answering your question. Everywhere I look in Scripture, the evangelistic activity depends on a spiritual revival, a sense of who really owns the room. And I honestly think that if we were, to focus, maybe not exclusively, but dramatically on reviving people's sense that Jesus really is in charge, we would see natural evangelism.
Yeah. We one of the things we do in this class, I invite you in to come with me, even though we disagree on some things, and then we do it in front of everybody. And part of the reason is I think that's helpful learning. The students at Wycliffe can handle it, the students at Talbot can handle it. And one of the places that we disagree is even back to, and you're an early church historian, so I tread lightly, but I do have Michael Green on my side, who wrote Evangelism in the Early Church. And he talks about how the early Christians sort of gossip the gospel, is his famous phrase. And they individually kept telling people. And for me, I want that to be something that people take up on their own. You're a little more cautious and you're saying, no, it's more multifaceted than that. Kind of explain a little bit.
The problem is evidence. We don't have much evidence. And I love Michael Green's work. I love his passion.
He was here at Wycliffe, where we are right now.
Yeah. But I think any honest appraisal of his book would agree there's very, very little evidence that was the case, that individual Christians evangelized.
He makes
a
bold claim. I mean, they gossip the gospel in the laundries.
Yeah. But then when you actually go to the primary sources he cites, it's not there.
So what do you think happened, and what does it mean for us today?
I have no doubt that Christians were ready to answer questions. Yeah. And I've got really good evidence from what we call catechism in the ancient world. The ancient church, if you wanted to know about Jesus, you wanted to be a Christian, they invited you to hours of lessons. Yeah. It's like Alpha on steroids.
Yeah. Alpha being this evangelism class that's sort of known around the world.
You would do well over 100 hours of lessons.
If you're thinking about being a Christian, come to our 100-hour course.
I know, it's crazy.
Yeah. But it changed the world.
It changed the world. And we have some of the lectures that have survived. And what we find is that while the lecturer is teaching Christian doctrine to these wannabe Christians, he's also saying, now, your Jewish friends will criticize you on this point. Here are 3 things to say.
Interesting. Okay.
And then he'll say, and your pagan neighbors, they'll criticize you for different things. Here are 3 things to say. So we know for sure Christians were being prepared to give answers for their faith. But most of the evidence that we have from the ancient world is Christians prayed for the salvation of their neighbours. They lived a godly life, deliberately, consciously trying to draw people in. And they were extremely generous in supporting the work of the gospel. And we have wonderful sermons from Augustine at the end of the 4th century, beginning of the 5th century, where he says to his congregation, I have no doubt that there will be no non-Christians left if you live the life worthy of the gospel. They will see the gospel in your lives. Or we have Chrysostom, the greatest preacher of antiquity, saying to the wealthy, you need to go on evangelistic journeys, just like Philip the evangelist. This is from his sermon on Acts chapter 8. And he says, and what do I mean? You must use your money not to buy more baths and more servants, but to employ an evangelist, build a church on your property. So the way the early church grew in antiquity was in more subtle ways. Yes, every Christian was on the lookout for opportunities to give an answer for the faith, but it's these other dimensions, prayer, godly life, and money.
We're going to continue our conversation in just a moment. Okay, we're back. But so then what does, like, a normal believer, what would you anticipate, expect? What advice would you give? You preach at churches all around the world. What do you say, this is what you should do so that the message of the gospel goes forth?
First, set apart Christ as Lord in your heart.
So that lordship comes again, a different life, a changed life.
Yeah.
Okay.
You've got to know he's in charge of every room you're going to find yourself in. And then you'll be
the best. A quiet confidence that comes from that.
The best version of yourself.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And then I'd say, pray your heart out. Because the way the New Testament describes it, when you're praying for your neighbor to become a Christian, or you're praying for the success of the gospel preacher, it's as if you yourself are preaching. And then when you give money, don't think of it as a secular second string activity. Paul calls it koinonia eistos euangelion, partnership into the gospel. So Paul uses this heightened language that giving money is actual partnership with him as a preacher. And that's the way to see it. And then, of course, you want to live such an actively godly life in front of people, not just being a nice human, but looking for opportunities to serve, to be humble, to give yourself for others, because that kind of life looks like the gospel. What is the gospel? God, the Lord, entered into the world in Jesus Christ, lived the life we could never live, gave himself on a cross for our sins. So the Christian life that looks like giving yourself for the unworthy is the life that points immediately to the gospel. And then if you're ready to give an answer, you will get questions. And I think we can trust God to use those things to build his kingdom, because that's exactly how the early church did it, combined with a willingness to suffer. So, I mean, I often confuse people by saying, I want us to lose well. And what I mean is, when things go really against us, we lose a vote, or we lose a legislation, a church is burnt down or whatever, we should be cheerful. We should be full of joy. The word you find connected with persecution in the New Testament most often is rejoice. I want us to be, like the early church, people who terrible things can happen to us and we rejoice. Why? Because we have set apart Christ as the Lord. We know no matter what happens to us, we've already won. We're the death and resurrection people. So we stand up, smile sweetly at our persecutors, and invite them to know Jesus. They smack us down, we stand up, we smile sweetly, and we invite them to Jesus. That's the model.
That kind of seems like a loser's mentality in America in 20, in the new time we live in. So, and I know that's part of your concern, is how we react to the cultural moments, right? So talk to us a little bit about why would you persuade Christians that that's a better way, and how to, and again, we talked about this. I was on your podcast on deception. It's a very well-known, well-listened to podcast. And one of the things I in that conversation, you were asking a lot about American evangelicalism. And because we have more influence, we can actually speak into laws being changed, and those laws being changed, I think, good laws can be changed and make the world more like Jesus wants it to be. I want to, I want things to be more right than wrong. And sometimes cultural power, which you're a bit askew, but cultural power, if evangelicals have it, can be used for good. Now, to be clear, I have no unpublished thought. I don't think evangelicals are always using their cultural power for good. So people can see all that. So help me to think about. In Australia, sure, you can talk about anything you want, and nobody cares as much in Australia if you're an evangelical. here with more cultural influence, should we use that influence for good to change laws and more?
Of course. But it comes down to persuasion.
Tell me.
And prayer and service and suffering.
Yeah, those 4 things keep coming up.
They keep coming up.
And those are historical things for you. Those are things that Christians have done over 2,000 years.
They're also things you find in the book of Acts.
No question. But you find more than that in the book of Acts. But yes, no question.
I think it's pretty much what you find in the book of Acts. But when I say I confuse people by saying, hey, you need to lose well, I'm not saying you go out of your way to try and lose.
Right. It's not, hey, this is great.
It's when you lose well.
Okay.
That's really what I mean.
It's a posture of the moment because of the lordship of Christ.
Yeah.
Okay.
Currently, in some parts of the world, it looks like we're really anxious. That when we lose a vote or some cultural moment, we look like we're super grumpy.
I think that's a fair description of American evangelicals.
And the world looks on and thinks, that's pretty insecure. It's like they don't feel happy unless they've got the reins of power. Whereas what I want us to be doing is persuading on every issue. So on all of the conservative issues, the trans issue, abortion, so on, I'm all for persuading.
So you're still in the public sphere?
Sure. I mean, my Undeceptions podcast is entirely about that.
Yes, it is.
And we have episodes on all those issues.
Everyone listens to your... most of us do, but not everyone does.
No, but I mean, I'm absolutely committed to that task. But I want those who don't yet believe to listen to the way I talk about an issue and not get the slightest sense that I'm speaking like I'm their pastor and they have to obey my spiritual authority.
You're recognizing that they are not followers of Jesus and treating them accordingly? What's the right way to describe it?
I'm trying to win them to the grace and good sense of Christ. But I don't do it in a way that says that is threatening or anything like that. So when Christians bubble up to the surface and have power in politics or whatever, media or whatever, I think it actually matters even more that they sound gentle and respectful. This is what 1 Peter says, after all, right? Always be prepared to give an answer, but with gentleness and respect. Because when you actually have power, it's very easy to come across like a bully. But I think when you have that cultural or political power, but you speak with the sweetness of Christ, with the compassion of Christ, where you're not relying on the power you have, but you see the power you have as a platform to make the best case. I love it. And when things don't go your way, you don't spit the dummy. Is that an expression one uses?
I've never heard that before.
Okay, well...
Spit the dummy?
Our English friends will have heard it in Australia. Spit the dummy. When a baby gets really angry and has a little, what do you call it? A pacifier.
Pacifier.
Passy. Spit the pacifier.
A passy. Okay, there you go. So to make it sound pithy, it's be spit the passy. Okay.
Okay.
We're 2 nations divided by a common language.
Absolutely.
That's Churchill, but
When we don't, when we make the case, intelligently, graciously, and so on, I think we're going to be more persuasive. Because as soon as people don't realize it's just my tribe against your tribe, they go into a mode of listening to persuasion. There is something actually in the brain science that if someone speaks like tribalistically, like I want this so that my tribe can be above your tribe, the person listening to you, suddenly all these very old and reptilian parts of the brain go tribal. Doesn't matter what you say, I'm protecting my tribe. But if it sounds more like, I really care for you, I care for our nation.
I even care for some of the same subjects you care for.
Yep. Yeah. And honestly, I wish this good for our society. Yeah. When people hear that, they're more open.
So it sounds like you want people to be winsome. And that's very 2010. We're kind of beyond that. People are, winsome is bad now. There's a war on winsome.
Well, I don't use the word winsome.
Okay, because? Because of the current debate about it?
Well, it's not a word I've ever used much. I'm thinking of using it again. I'll tell you why in a second. But I don't use the word winsome. And yes, you're right, people have turned right against winsomeness. It's not really a biblical word, right? What we do have in Scripture repeatedly is to speak to the outsider with grace, blessing, respect, gentleness, never sarcasm, grumpiness, arrogant, never any of those, smugness, no. It's grace, gentleness, respect, etc. So people call that winsomeness. It's just apostolic instruction. But the reason I'm thinking of using the word winsome,
You see, I want to know now.
just to be subversive.
I'm pro-winsome.
Just to be subversive. Well, etymologically, it means joy.
Okay.
Well, hello. I would have thought speaking with joy
That's a good thing.
is profoundly
And you can
good.
win some if you're winsome, even though that's not etymological. That's so not etymological what it means. But I think, because I'm of the view that winsome is not the culture or strategy, it's a way of Jesus. It's being in that Christ-like matter. But I think right now, I think people need to say, well, how should I speak in a culture that's as divided as ours? How do I be a person of character, but also a person of making right moral choices? So how do I simultaneously speak up for what's right when even in the speaking of what's right, that's offensive to people?
It is, but let us allow the truth to be the offence, not the way we present it. And let us, whenever we defend the truth, sound like we're not protecting our tribe. We think this is good for you. I want you to know this. I want you to enjoy this blessing. That's why I want to persuade you to it. It's not because I want more space on the patch.
Good. I want you to continue. Tell us more about that in just a second as well. Continue our conversation in just a moment. Okay, we're back. Ed Stetzer Live. So you got a person who's maybe struggled with gender dysphoria, has now decided to transition, and you say to them, "I want you to flourish as as the male God made you to be." That's not how they're going to receive it. So is there a way to be like you're talking about to somebody who sees this as a justice issue and you on the wrong side and the oppressor side?
I don't want to bring this back to promoting undeceptions, but
No,
we have an episode called Transgender,
Right.
where we have not only a top psychologist who specialises in this, but also a transgender woman, that is a male who's transitioned. This is exactly the question I put to them. We went back and forth about their experience, but in the end, I asked, what do you think of someone like me, a conservative, a Christian, who honestly believes you're a male, but will nonetheless treat you with all of the grace and gentleness and friendship, and I'd have you over for dinner, and we've had a wonderful hour together here in the studio. What do you think of that person who's nonetheless not persuaded that you are a woman in any sense? And this person, Dana, said, that would be fine if there were more of that. But what so often happens is the truth that I hold, that Dana is a male, not a woman, leads to quite bully behaviour and exclusionary activity and so on. And that's where the problems emerge. But Dana said to me, if you are able to do what you just said, I and many trans people I know would be delighted.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about your book. The book is Bullies and Saints, an honest look at the good and evil of Christian history. You work hard to avoid whitewashing and blackwashing. That's sort of the theme and the whole point of the book. It's been interesting to watch the response. I've seen, it featured in CNN and all kinds of other places. So obviously it's gotten a great response. So why do you think it's important that we see the reality of both of these truths?
For theological and historical reasons. Theologically, Christians know that we're not good through and through. We're the ones who believe that we're rotten, that there's something dark in the heart, even of a Christian leader. And it was our Lord who said to his disciples, not to the Pharisees, "You hypocrite, why do you worry about the speck in your neighbour's eye when there is a log in your eye?" Right? So I think that gives us theological permission to own the logs in our eye.
You sound like a good Calvinist at this moment. Just acknowledge the depravity.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Yes. And then there's the history. It is just a fact that some Christians through the ages have done terrible things.
It's hard to miss it.
There was in 415, just at the dawn of Christianity gaining a little bit more power, a mob that went and dragged a female philosopher out into the street, and I won't give the details, but they murdered her very, very publicly. And the man who led the mob was the man who read the Bible in the church in Alexandria every Sunday, Peter the Reader. Now, there's nothing we can do about that. That really happened.
Really happened.
And I could list story after story like that. But why don't I then become totally blackwashing?
Sure.
Because actually, that's a good example. What Peter and his mob did, we know about it. We have primary sources about that event. Why? Because Christians everywhere else slammed what those Christians did and praised this pagan female philosopher as a sweet, intelligent, wonderful woman. So that right there tells you, you've got sometimes Christians behaving very badly, but there is built into Christianity this self-corrective mechanism where we notice the log in our eye. And the primary sources we have about this incident are proof that Christians were outraged and repented and were sorrowful and indeed not anti this pagan woman, but very pro this pagan woman. And you could take that in every era of Christianity. There are failings, but what so often happens is someone is reading their Gospels one day and then looking at the church and going, hang on, we don't look like this.
Right.
And they ring the
Not
alarm
supposed
bell.
to be who we are, yeah.
And because there's this built-in self-corrective mechanism, and because we don't believe we're good through and through and only getting better, people listen to the alarm bell and repent, and a renewal breaks out. And I see that everywhere in Christian history. So it gives me great hope that although Christians can depart from the beautiful melody of Jesus, there are those who still remember that melody and call us back to it.
Yeah, and the melody line is a central theme that you use, this idea of the melody line as a way to measure the church's faithfulness across the centuries. So how did that framework shape the way you evaluated both the light and dark moments of history?
Yeah. So there is no doubt in my mind that Jesus wrote the most beautiful tune. Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who mistreat you, which he took all the way to his cross. This is not just an arbitrary ethic. This is the shape of his whole ministry. Loving enemies, us, by giving himself. So if that's the melody, then that's what the Christian life should look like too. And to the degree Christians depart from that, we can say they are Christians, but they're not acting Christianly. Right. To the degree that they come back and they look like that, they build hospitals, they start charities and all the other things. They were the first to start trying to free slaves. I know that's a very fraught topic, but it is the fact that Christians, not ancient pagans or Romans, certainly not recent secularists, it was Christians who were trying their hardest to end slavery. These are all Christians singing in tune with the melody. And when our skeptical friends point out the terrible things Christians have done, I want to say, you're absolutely right. But when they do this, are they following Jesus? Just on your own estimation of Jesus, are they following Jesus or disobeying Jesus? And I've found the most honest skeptics say, oh, well, it's obvious.
Sure.
They're disobeying Jesus. And I say to them, well, isn't your problem then that Christians aren't Christian enough? What you're saying to me is you want Christians to be more Christian.
Sure.
So we're on the same page.
Right.
I want Christians to be more Christians.
Yeah. So you argue a lot of even the world's humanitarian instincts. You talk about charity, dignity, equality, all emerge from the Christian worldview, whatever term you want to use. Explain it to me.
Clearly. The ancient world was very hierarchical. They did not believe every human being was equal and precious. And their argument was very logical. An ancient Greek looked at, they would say, you've got a weak, sick cow, and you've got a glorious milk-producing cow. Are you telling me they're both equal? That I should go down to the shop and buy them for the same price? And they would then look at humans. You've got smart, powerful, good-looking, healthy. You're saying they're the same value as, right? Jews came along and said, yeah, everyone's made in the image of God.
Sure.
That idea, everyone made in the image of God, was explosive. But Jewish communities in antiquity kept it to themselves. And and their social services were for themselves. We don't have evidence of early Jewish hospitals or Jewish food programs for non-Jews. What happened is Christianity just inherited that doctrine of the image of God in every human being, loved by God, and universalized it precisely because Jesus said this thing is for all the nations, for all the kinds of people that you'll ever meet. So Christianity, in one way, you could say, is a universalizing Jewish ethic, with a few other things added. You know, the idea that God would give himself on a cross for us, that's an offense even within Judaism. So that supercharges the notion that I should be giving myself for everyone, because everyone is equally loved by God, equally an object of his care. And this started, as I said, the attempts to free slaves, the first hospitals in the 370s, charitable works, the beginning of schooling for everyone, rich and poor, boys and girls, starts in the church.
Last question, just got a couple minutes left. You, at the end of the book, you call to a return to humility, generosity of Jesus. Some of the themes we've been talking about here. Practically speaking, what would it look like if we actually embodied that melody line again?
This is such a profound question. It's so hard to give an immediate response. What would it mean? It would mean we would become known as the people who want to give themselves for others.
John Dixon, thanks. Ed Stetzer Live is a production of Moody Radio. Moody Radio is a ministry of Moody Bible Institute. And thanks again. Make sure you listen via podcast by going to edstetzerlive.com and download the links there. Thanks for listening.